Every decade has a box office disaster. But these movies didn't just flop. They destroyed careers, bankrupted studios, and cost billions in today's money. One was so bad, nearly half the cast died. Another got banned for being too disturbing, all the way back in 1932. These are the most expensive failures of all time adjusted for inflation. And trust me, the deeper we go, the worse they get. Back in 1931, director Todd Browning made Dracula, massive hit, so MGM figured they'd let him do whatever he wanted next. Huge mistake. Browning made a super strange, uncomfortable circus movie called Freaks. It used actual circus performers with real disabilities, which completely freaked out audiences back then. People just flat out refused to see it. The movie cost about $300 grand to make, only made $4,000 worldwide. MGM was so embarrassed they immediately pulled it from theaters, chopped it up, retitled it Nature's Mistakes, and shipped it off to some sketchy distributors. It was even banned outright in England for about 30 years. As for Todd Browning, his career basically died after this. He directed a few more films through the 30s, then retired early and vanished from Hollywood. In 1944, Darryl Zanuck, head of 20th Century Fox, was obsessed with President Woodrow Wilson. So obsessed, in fact, he personally supervised a big-budget biopic about him. The studio sank over $5 million into this film. Insanely expensive at the time, basically around $90 million today. Critics actually loved it. It got 10 Oscar nominations and won 5, including for screenplay. But nobody came to see it because Fox set ticket prices ridiculously high to recover costs. Normally, movies cost around 25 cents to see, but Fox made theaters charge an entire $1 just for Wilson. That's about $18 today. Theater owners begged Fox to lower prices, but Zanuck refused. The movie bombed so badly, Zanuck literally banned his own employees from mentioning it around him. Fox lost about $2 million. That's nearly $37 million today. Pretty terrible, but honestly, still nothing compared to today's massive flops. Howard Hughes financed this huge RKO epic about Genghis Khan, starring John Wayne as a Mongol warlord. The casting alone made people roll their eyes. Add the super wooden dialogue, a clumsy script, and the whole movie was basically doomed from the start. It cost about $6 million, around $70 million today, which was huge for a film back then. And while it did okay at the box office, actually one of the top earners of 1956, it still didn't come close to breaking even because the budget was so inflated. But that's not even the worst part. They filmed near nuclear test sites, and later, almost half the cast and crew ended up getting cancer. Over 90 people got sick. 46 eventually died, including John Wayne himself, Susan Hayward, and director Dick Powell. It's now remembered as one of the worst films ever made, not just for quality reasons, but for the tragic human toll too. Right after the massive headache of Cleopatra, which nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox, producer Samuel Bronston thought it was a great idea to make his own gigantic Roman epic. Director Anthony Mann created the largest film set in movie history, a recreation of the Roman Forum that covered over 92,000 square meters, insanely expensive, around $19 million, basically $200 million in today's money. At the box office, the movie ended up total disaster, barely made back a quarter of its huge budget. Just 3 months after the movie's release, Bronston's entire company went bankrupt. Cleopatra at least eventually broke even, thanks to TV rights and home video, but the fall wasn't so lucky, lost roughly $148 million adjusted in the end. Still, Martin Scorsese thinks everyone should see it at least once. He says clearly, "Today, a film like The Fall of the Roman Empire has the poignant beauty of a lost art. This was the autumn of the great American epics. They simply became too expensive to make." By the late 60s, the era of big-budget Hollywood musicals was basically dead. Darling Lili officially put the nail in the coffin. Starring Julie Andrews and directed by Blake Edwards, it was this bizarre spy musical mashup that Paramount somehow thought was a good idea. Andrews alone got paid over $1 million just to star. Originally, it wasn't even supposed to be a musical. They planned a couple of song scenes, sure, but the studio stepped in and insisted on turning the whole thing into a full-blown musical, totally against Edwards' wishes. During production, Edwards had constant studio interference. Execs even hired people without telling him and then lied about it. When the film finally came out, Edwards completely disowned it. Studio had final cut, he hated it, refused responsibility. It bombed spectacularly, cost about $22 million, barely made back $5 million worldwide, total disaster. Years later, in the 90s, Edwards got a chance to recut it and immediately chopped out almost 30 minutes of the studio's original footage. But the damage was long done. $140 million adjusted down the drain. We can't talk about movie flops without mentioning Heaven's Gate. Michael Cimino had just won big with The Deer Hunter, and United Artists basically handed him a blank check for his next film. On paper, it was a sprawling Western epic meant to rival classics like Gone with the Wind. The budget ballooned past $40 million, which was absolutely insane money for 1980, over $150 million today. Cimino shot endlessly, spent lavishly, and ended up turning in a nearly 4-hour-long movie. The studio tried to fix it, but anyway, it made less than 10% of its budget at the box office. Critics blamed Cimino personally for bankrupting the studio and ending the golden era of Hollywood. United Artists took such a massive hit, it had to be sold off shortly afterward. Cimino never recovered either. Every movie he tried making after this bombed too, each one worse than the last. By the 90s, he was directing low-budget flops nobody saw. Biggest flop of the 90s is easily The 13th Warrior, starring Antonio Banderas. Based on Michael Crichton's book, Eaters of the Dead, this Viking adventure started as a huge production, directed by John McTiernan, who had already done classics like Die Hard. Shoulda worked. But this movie quickly went completely off the rails. McTiernan's initial version tested horribly with audiences, so the studio called in Crichton himself to fix it with reshoots. Here's the wild part. They actually let both McTiernan and Crichton shoot separate reshoots at the same time on different sound stages. Imagine the money spent on this alone. All that reshooting, editing, and endless delays meant the movie missed its prime summer release date in 1998, got bumped to spring 1999, then got dumped again at the end of August, a time when theaters are basically dead. It got crushed at the box office by holdover hits like The Sixth Sense. By the end, it had burned through so much money, the total loss came out to around $243 million, adjusted for today. This sci-fi comedy starring Eddie Murphy had been in development hell since the 80s, rewritten countless times, delayed over and over. Warner Brothers finally forced it out into theaters in 2002 after sinking around $100 million into it. It made just over $7 million worldwide. Total train wreck. Reviews were brutal. Critics shredded the paper-thin script, terrible jokes, and confused story. Warner Brothers knew it was a turkey, didn't even bother screening it for critics beforehand. A guaranteed red flag. Audiences smelled disaster, stayed away completely. Director was Ron Underwood. He'd actually made solid hits earlier, stuff like Tremors and City Slickers, but this movie totally killed his career. After Pluto Nash, Underwood never made another big movie, ended up directing random episodes of TV shows instead. Even Eddie Murphy started openly joking about how bad it was. Basically became Hollywood's go-to example of a terrible flop, but they didn't learn their lesson, because next came John Carter. In pure dollar terms, Disney's John Carter is still probably the biggest flop of all time. Originally titled John Carter of Mars, Disney shortened the name because Mars Needs Moms had bombed before it. Didn't help at all. They spent around $250 million producing this sci-fi epic. Then they dropped another $100 million into a totally muddled marketing campaign. Ads and trailers were a mess. Nobody even understood who John Carter was supposed to be, what the movie was about, nothing. Early trailers were so dull because director Andrew Stanton insisted on controlling them personally, and that just made everything worse. audiences had zero interest. Even when Disney panicked and threw more money at ads right before release, it was way too late. After everything, Disney admitted openly they were losing about $280 million in today's money on John Carter. Disney again, and this time with Marvel. You'd think a sequel to Captain Marvel, which made over $1 billion, would be a slam dunk. But no. Turns out the original's huge success mostly came from being sandwiched between Infinity War and Endgame. Without that MCU hype train, nobody cared. Then there was the actors' strike, ending just days before release. Brie Larson had almost no time to do promotion. Plus, the movie tried to connect directly to a Disney Plus show, Ms. Marvel, which didn't really click with fans the way Marvel hoped, definitely not like hits like Loki or WandaVision. Reviews were pretty mediocre, just 62% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which is weak for Marvel, and audiences gave it a very lukewarm B cinema score. Marvel fans stayed away in droves, and the film ended up losing Disney around $237 million. That's MCU's worst movie ever.